for you all is a masterclass in college admissions. My name is Marcus DeWitt. I'm the founder of Blue Ivy Coaching. We're a college counseling company. I'm based in Miami, and we also have offices in Houston, abroad, and we have clients really from all over. I'm joined here by Olivia and Grecia from my team, who work directly as kind of family partners, accompanying families. And we have a team of 60 full-time college counselors with a strong academic leadership. That is kind of the foundation here of our service. So our focus here is we're helping students to fulfill their academic potential. And so while our name is Blue Ivy, that's kind of a Trojan horse. We're not just focused on the Ivy League schools. It's really about helping each student find kind of their unique path and what major university. 20% of our students actually study outside of the US. They go to the UK, they go to Scotland, they go to Spain. So we have a very kind of broad and holistic understanding of kind of what's the best career and university pathway. So as mentioned, we worked with 4,000 students. That's just a little bit of background, kids getting into all the top schools. All right, so today's presentation is focused on these three key questions: what to study, where to study, and what you have to do to get in. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on the first two. And then the third is really going to be the focus in terms of admission strategies. So the first question, I know they sound very simple, but unpacking each of these questions is more complex than it seems. How do you guide high school students, especially in this moment, as we're entering the fourth industrial revolution? How do you guide high school students? How do you guide your kids in knowing what skills to develop, what major to pursue, and ultimately, what is the right career path? Right. So I'm sure everybody here has seen the reports, whether it's from McKinsey, World Economic Forum, IBM, that we're entering the fourth industrial revolution. I've been doing this presentation for a couple of years. And when I used to tell people, guys, the year 2050, 85% of the jobs that will exist don't exist yet. People used to look at me a little bit like a crazy person. What is he talking about? ChatGPT drops at the end of 2022. Now everybody gets it. And when I throw out 2050, it's like, what about 2025? Right. And so I think we're all really understanding that we're at the forefront, that some of this labor disruption is already happening. And so this is just kind of a sample, basing ourselves on the World Economic Forum 2025 jobs report that dropped in January, understanding that the degrees that served even us here kind of on the Zoom and, a generation of parents or grandparents. In other words, if 2/3 of the jobs or 4/5 of the jobs that will exist don't exist yet, then we shouldn't use the references of how maybe we became successful are necessarily going to be the same pathways generating success or being successful in the future. In other words, the traditional pathways, both academic and career, might not be those same pathways that the next generation will be pursuing. And so fourth industrial revolution, just like previous industrial revolutions, is just about job elimination, but it's more so about job creation. So it's less about AI is taking our jobs, but it's more, people using AI will take our jobs. And so what are those pathways that we should be exploring with high school students so that they're choosing a major that is aligned with those kind of tailwinds that the way that the job markets are evolving rather than facing headwinds when they graduate from college. So here's just a few examples. I can kind of unpack some of these as to why and what's happening. But as we think about, what major to study and what career paths to explore, what internships, what are the interests that they should be developing in high school, this is kind of a starting point. Now, our purpose here isn't just kind of like what is the right job based on economics, but it's a more holistic version of Ikigai. Sorry for the formatting there. Ikigai is Japanese philosophy of your reason for being, right? So I really like this because it's the intersection of these four questions. I think often we begin with the first one, which is what you love. Study your passion. I hear all the time parents saying, whatever makes them happy, study your passion. That's often what society says. I like something I appreciate from Scott Galloway, Prof G, is he's like, don't study your passion. Okay, but we can't just go to the flip side and just like study something that pays you. I think that's the other side of the coin. And so what we want to find is the intersection of your interests, your skill set, I think this question of what the world needs is just a poetic way of talking about the job market. I think what the world needs is what jobs are available and how can you add value. And that intersection of those four questions gives us a deeper sense of purpose, which is the Japanese philosophy of Ikigai. So this is kind of the framework, I would say, is the guiding philosophy that we use when we're working with students. And then now the question that's on everybody's mind is the ROI of studying certain degrees, especially as private schools are starting to hit $100,000. It just happened with Wellesley, Tufts, U Chicago. The top private schools are now costing $100,000 a year. Well, what is the ROI of of spending $400,000 on college? And I know we probably have a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, and entrepreneurs in particular question the value of college. I think often successful professionals and those that work at prestigious firms, see it as a requisite for that pathway. And so I think what this is really interesting is it helps us to kind of evaluate the ROI for specific majors, and then also based on the ranking of a school. So as you see here, what's really interesting is engineering. Even if you go to a second, third, or even bottom tier school, you still have a better ROI on your college degree than going to a top school for another major. And so I think this is also something that we're looking at with students, which leads us to the next point, which is building the list. It's not just about what major you study is very important. Sometimes it's more important, but it also, for example, in economics, you can get great ROI studying economics at a top school because that's going to facilitate kind of more exclusive job opportunities. Economics at a more mid-tier school is not going to have the same ROI. So it's this mix between your major and your university. So that leads us to also, again, there's kind of like this, I always like to talk about two pillars of the work: strategy and exploration. So exploration is the Ikigai. The strategy is the ROI and the job market. And on the university, there's a similar level. The strategy has to do with the ROI and the college admissions part of how do I get in. The exploration is fit. Big school, small school, private school, public school. As I mentioned, I'm a graduate from Yale. And when I was at Yale, I worked in the college admissions office. At Yale, I went to one football game in 4 years. What you would do Thursday and Friday night is go see your friends. There's like every week there's a new theater play. And something special about Yale is that the off-Broadway plays will debut in New Haven. And if they get good feedback, they get launched in New York City. So our campus culture was very artistic, very cultural, compared to Dartmouth, which is more outdoorsy, UMich, which is that classic college experience. Do you want to join a sorority, a fraternity? Having those conversations, planning really thoughtful visits, not just walking around and taking pictures about how beautiful a campus is, but knowing which questions to ask is about identifying fit. I always tell students, it's like love. When you love someone's imperfections, then it's true love. So let's find about what students don't like about the school. What are people's complaints about Babson? What are the students at UT Austin who are not happy? What are they unhappy about? Let's figure out not just what the beautiful shiny brochure says, but let's figure out what are the complaints, what are the imperfections, and if we're okay with those, if those sit all right with us, then we found fit. I think something that's really changed in the world of college and college admissions, and frankly, a lot of colleges are struggling to keep up, is this next point on co-op. So I actually just learned this the other day. There's only 10 colleges in America that have formal co-op programs, which is where they get you an internship and give you credit for work experience as part of your college degree. This system is very common in Canada. In the UK, it's called the sandwich system. You do 2 years of study, your third year in industry, and then you go back for your final year of thesis, your senior year. But there's only 10 colleges in America that have the co-op. And the number one school is Northeastern. Its acceptance rate has crashed from 40 to 5% over the last 5 years. So this just shows the explosion in demand that there is for apprenticeships, internships, and real work experiences. Other colleges are scrambling to try to put together programs in action, but college now is more about ROI than it is, I'm going to go to an Ivy League school and learn Greek and Latin and religious studies and kind of liberal arts. So obviously that still exists, but these are important questions to ask as we're choosing a college is what are we looking for? Obviously, we'll talk about how this process has become much more competitive in the last few years. We have to build a balanced list. I think you used to apply to 6 or 7 schools and kind of have a balance there between your reaches, your matches, your safeties. Now you're applying to 10 to 15 schools, and the students that are applying to the very top schools are typically applying 15 to 20. So the average student on a nationwide level is applying to 12. I would say on average, our students are applying to 15, especially when we're looking at competitive schools. And the reason for that is because this process has become much more competitive. So something I always like to highlight here, especially when I speak to parents, I always speak to parents who are like, oh, I'm a Duke grad. I don't need a college consultant. I figured this out. So Duke today has a 5% acceptance rate. Duke 20 years ago, so let's say that you're 42, you're in your mid 40s. When you applied to Duke 25 years ago, it had a 25% acceptance rate. Today, Florida State has a 25% acceptance rate. Bucknell has a 25% acceptance rate. All good schools. What I'm saying is your safety school when you were applying to college 25 years ago, today is a reach or even high reach. So it's a different ballgame. The volume of applications, as you can see here in this chart, has skyrocketed. And that sent the acceptance rate crashing from 25, 30, 40% to single digits. And so what the students need to get in is extraordinary extracurriculars and a strong academic profile. Now, you might think I'm just talking about the Ivy League schools. This is really across the board. So we just talked about Northeastern. I like to highlight Tulane. Tulane is the number 64, 68 school in the US News rankings. It has a 9% acceptance rate. So all the time with parents would say, we're not looking at Harvard or Stanford or the Ivy League schools. We just want a good second tier school. It's like, well, the number 68 school in America has a 9% acceptance rate. Right? So really across the board, the top 100 schools, especially the private schools, are trending towards single digit acceptance rates. And so it's not just about the competitiveness it is to get into Harvard, but it's the how all schools really across the board are becoming highly selective, including the public schools. And as part of that, it's kind of we're building a list. Some of this stuff is hard to predict or anticipate, but it's a question that always comes up of like, what is the value? We're going to do this whole process, this whole investment in time, energy, resources into college admissions. Especially now with all the craziness that's happening in some of those top schools. What's the value? Is it still valuable to go to these schools? Is it worth it to spend, to drop $400K going to an Ivy Plus school? And so this article is from a research that professors at Brown and Stanford did a couple years ago. And this is from the Wall Street Journal, which is they analyzed, over kind of a 10-year period, students that went to the Flagship public schools. So Flagship is like the leading school of the state. So in Texas, that'd be UT Austin. And the UC is UCLA Berkeley. And Michigan, University of Michigan. So just like those leading flagship schools, they compare the graduates of those students to the graduates of those that went to the Ivy Plus. Ivy Plus is inclusive of schools like U, Chicago, Stanford, MIT, Duke that aren't technically Ivy League, but kind of those top 15 schools. And I think what they found here is really interesting. And so if you look at, I'm going to start from the bottom. If you look at mean income, on average, graduates from top public schools and Ivy League schools make the same amount of money. Everybody's more or less in that top 20 percentile for income, which is, I think, $200,000 a year. But if we start to look at more kind of the world of prestige and status, so look at earnings in the top 1%. So this means this is kind of the scale here. So it's not the scale at the very bottom. There's another scale here under working at a prestigious firm. So about 7% of public school graduates are in the top 1%. And this goes all the way up. This goes 12% higher. This goes all the way up to almost 20%. So 19% of top 1% earners come from Ivy Plus schools. If you look at those that get into elite grad schools, specifically referring to med school admissions, law school admissions, med school is way more competitive than undergrad. There's also that plus. But really where you see the benefit is working at an elite firm and working at a prestigious firm. So what's the difference? An elite firm or prestigious firm referring to getting a job at a big 4 accounting firm, getting a job at a big 3 consulting firm, working in investment banking, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. In other words, I think here what's kind of clear is the point of going to an elite university is to get an elite job. Overall, you can make the same amount of money, especially through entrepreneurship. Doesn't really matter. And so I think like with this in mind, this is the type of ROI that when you put this together with the ROI calculation of a major, and then you analyze a student and a family specific profile, background, and context, you start to look at how everybody should have a different college list. Some kids, when they have clarity that, no, I want to be a doctor. Well, yes, there's a lot of value of going to a great school for pre-med that sets you up for a great med school that'll then calculate to future earnings. Not all doctors make the same amount of money. But when you look at like, broadly speaking, lawyers, accountants, professional jobs, it's similar. There's many other jobs or career paths that don't rely as heavily on kind of the name brand of a university. And so these are the types of conversations we like to have on an individual basis with each family. There's no right answer, but it's good to have this data to kind of dispel some of the myths and really look in this kind of like rigorous way at what are the right choices to make for each student. All right, so that was part 2. I said there's 3 questions. So part 1 is how to choose a major. Part 2 is thinking about how to build a list. Again, the strategy and the exploration. We're now going to go into part 3, which is how do they make decisions, right? So when they have 3, 4, 5% acceptance rates, how are they choosing which student gets in? So as I mentioned, my background is working in the admissions office at Yale and had that opportunity to sit in committees and understand. And so what I'm going to share with you is some of the frameworks that admissions officers make so that you all can understand kind of how to start building a profile and designing a narrative that can be useful in a college admissions process. So the first thing here is this is just the list of priorities. So on the one hand, it's a list of what do you submit to colleges, but really what this is priorities. So this is an order of importance in a college admissions committee. So the first is unweighted GPA, and then they'll look at the course rigor. So why do I put emphasis here? I hear all the time. Yesterday was with a family, and the girl asked her what her GPA was, and she was like 4.9. And you're like, wow, 4.9. What's your unweighted GPA? 3.5. So schools have gotten crazy with weighted GPAs. They come up with all these insane ways of calculating it. If it's a core program, but it's an AP, we're going to give you plus 15 points. Like that's a real example from big public school, leading public school in Houston. So imagine that you get an 80 in AP US history, like an 80 back when I was in school, that was a C. But because it's AP US history, now that's suddenly a 95, right? So weighted GPA, frankly, is BS. Unweighted GPA gives you that raw performance. But then, of course, we're going to see, okay, you got unweighted GPA, but you took easy classes. Then that's, and that I know that's the point of weighted GPA, but schools have kind of gotten carried away with that. Okay. The next point here is SAT, ACT. And this comes here to the question that was thrown in their chat, which has to do with homeschool. Homeschool students are, it's kind of a blessing and a curse when it comes to college admissions. What's the blessing? You're going to be unique. You're going to have a different skill set. You're going to have a different way of thinking about the world. You're going to contribute to that kind of diversity to the student campus. You're going to have a different story than everybody else. And that's really appreciated. What is the curse? Is there's so much pressure on standardized assessment to make sure that you have quote unquote college readiness. So homeschools, so if you go to, if you go to a private school, a traditional private school, they'll look at your final AP scores, but they really care about GPA. When you're homeschooled, they're going to care a lot more about your standardized testing and about your AP scores or whatever, British system. Like it's really important to have some measure of external standardized assessment, which again gets really tricky because isn't the point, well, one of several points of homeschooling is kind of escape that system. So you're kind of stuck in a catch-22, which is well, the purpose of homeschooling these kids is to escape kind of the nonsense of standardized assessments, but then you kind of get caught where how else do we demonstrate And so there's some interesting, I think we could maybe on an individual, I'll get in more into it, but like there's some interesting alternatives to it. So in Florida, there's a new standardized assessment called the CLT, the Classical Learning Test. And it emerged out of this kind of Florida homeschool movement. And the founders of that test. So there's some kind of interesting strategies there of like, how do we not just fall back into the cookie cutter profile of doing APs and an SAT if you're homeschooled? And some of them evolve around, I know I was talking about Jay around dual enrollment, which we can talk more about. There's kind of pros and cons to that. So there's kind of a combination of like, do the classical learning test. You got to do the SAT still, but maybe you do dual enrollment. And so maybe there's kind of like an approach there. It also depends on, are we homeschool looking at Yale, or are we homeschool looking at, a small liberal arts college, or in Wilson? It kind of depends on the objectives as well. So these are the two, but thanks for the question. And y'all feel free to jump in. So these are the two, academic rigor, quote unquote, college readiness are the most important. Now, when I worked in admissions, I had the opportunity to turn around to the director of admissions and ask him, I was like, I'm just on one committee. You've got the whole bird's eye view of the 50,000 students that are applying. What percentage of them have the profile between GPA and SAT to be accepted? Like what percentage of the students are college ready? Is it 85%? So it's important to understand is that, okay, 100, we can eliminate 15% of applicants because they're not college ready. They saw Gossip Girl, wanted to go to Yale, but didn't have the profile. Okay, how do we go from 85 to 5, 85 to 3? That's the real job of the committee. And so this comes down to the strength of your essays, your activities, and your letters of recommendation. If you get to a final phase, there's an interview, although frankly, that's getting phased out and from a lot of admissions processes. Okay, I'll take this question as well. So how do schools treat admissions for kids with IEPs due to ADHD? These kids typically don't do well in standardized exams. So I think, frankly, my response to that would be the schools that the traditional elite Ivy plus schools won't do so much of this kind of special consideration. They're just going to expect you to kind of fit into kind of their box. Those schools are typically not taking risks on students that might be brilliant and talented, but express their talent and intelligence in ways independent or separate from standardized exams. The types of schools that would be excited to receive an application like that would typically be more like liberal arts colleges, like a Reed in Oregon, which is it's one of the most intellectually rigorous schools. A Reed, a Warren Wilson, a Center, like a lot of the liberal arts colleges are the ones that are excited to meet students who, have multiple forms of intelligence. Will a Yale or a Stanford kind of give special consideration because a kid got a 1,200 instead of a 1,500? Absolutely not. Their philosophy is you just have to do well in the traditional standardized forms of assessment to be considered for admission. Like MIT, 90% of students at MIT are scoring in the top 0.01% on the SAT. MIT is not taking any risks and not accepting any students who are not perfect score or near perfect score. I'd love to tell you otherwise, but it's just not the truth. Are there different weights on different
I would say, Marcus, just let's continue with the presentation, and then we'll open it up for people to just ask the questions because I know what happened last time. We never made it. We never made it to the presentation. So just go through. I didn't make it. I think I was stuck at this slide. So let's do the presentation. Yeah, and then we'll open it up for questions.
All
I
right, fair
promise.
enough. Thank you. Yeah, no, great. Awesome. Okay. So the point here is, thanks guys, and thanks for the questions. I'll get to you guys. So the point here is, all right, how do we go from 85 to 5? So the essays, the activities, in other words, the profile, kind of the soft side. So this is the black box. Like when I was trained, these are the 4 categories. Some schools rank like Duke. Other schools just use it as to discuss and have a conversation like Harvard. But like these are the points. In other words, when we're sitting down reading an essay, we're not looking at like, wow, they got calc. Like, no, that's already a given. We're caring about intellectual curiosity. So that's a difference between capacity and curiosity. Capacity is the grades and the GPA and the standardized test. Curiosity is, are you curious about the world? Are you interested in how the world works and about the past and how to reinterpret today's contemporary events based on historical or literary events or figures? Like that's curiosity. Interdisciplinary connections, that's curiosity. We want that at these schools. Critical thinking, not just accepting the world as it is. I think critical thinking on the one hand is like questioning systems, societies. On the other hand, it's closely related to innovation. You have to be a critical thinker to innovate. So there's different forms of that, both on a political and maybe entrepreneurial, engineering, STEM side. Concern for others, not just be focused on your own ambition and your own egotistical interests, but it's using your passion. I think this is something we focus a lot on the students. It's not like, I see all the time students that want to study business or finance, and their community service is they fly down to Dominican Republic to like build a house in rural. It's like, what does building a house in Dominican Republic have to do with your interest in finance? So rather, I'm interested in students creating projects, teach financial literacy to the kid, do a financial literacy workshop with the kids at a low income school and like across the street. Like be engaged with your own community and use your passion to make the world a better place, right? Community service should never be volunteerism. It should never be check the box. It should be authentic. Like I'm actually interested in making the world a better place through my passion. And then the final point here, and I think this comes to your question, Jordan, which is the academic and extracurricular recognition. Now, notice here, I don't say activity or achievement. I say recognition. And so that takes us here to the 4 tiers. So here's another framework. Y'all can screenshot this. It's very simplified. At other schools, it's much more complex. But again, for the purposes of today's presentation, we'll go with the simple version. Tier 4 means we're a member. We're participating in some activities. We're involved. We don't have leadership. Better to do it than to not do it. We're a member of a club. We're in an honor society. We're participating. Basic level of participation. Basic level of activity. Tier 3 is we have some responsibility. We're not just showing up the day of and doing our part. We're planning. We're in charge of fundraising. We're managing the budget. We're doing social media. We have responsibility before. We were elected an officer, treasurer. You're the treasurer, secretary of this high school council. Tier 2 is now you are the president of SGA. You're the secretary general of Model UN. You're the captain of varsity soccer. So you are you were recognized by your peers, your community. You're pulling off a large scale event, like your tier 2 activity. Tier 1, like this is now where we're not just interested and we're not just leading. We're good. We have talent. We're accomplished. So the number 6 ranked player in the country for tennis. Like you want to play tennis at Stanford, you've got to be ranked. You want to study economics at Stanford, we need the equivalent. So how do you do that? There's no such thing as like a UTR, which is like the tennis ranking. There's no such thing as a ranking for tennis, for economics. Now there is for math. So I think we're just talking about MIT. You'll never see MIT at a college fair. MIT doesn't do college fairs. Where's the only place you'll see an MIT, and this is exaggerating, but the only place you'll see an MIT admissions officer? At the IMOs, the International Math Olympiads. When you go there and you see the world's like top 1,000 students that are mathematicians, yep, there's the director of admissions too, and his admissions team. And so there is a ranking for mathematicians. There is a ranking for physics. There's an economics Olympiad actually. And then there's these academic competitions as well. Sorry, let me get to that. There's the John Locke Institute that Oxford and Princeton organize of an essay contest. There's the Wharton High School investment competition. So we encourage students to really take their interests seriously. It could be that you launch a podcast and you get a bunch of people listening to your podcast. Oh my God, you published a children's book. That's amazing. I think it's less about like the the pressure cooker rat race of how do you kind of win these competitions. It's more like, hey, you're interested in entrepreneurship? Start a business. Your business at $100,000 of revenue, that's insane. That's tier 1. When you do things that reach really scale, then you get to that tier 1. So it's not just about how do you work up the corporate ladder of a student organization. It's also like, how do you have impact? How do you not just have these kind of like, I hate titles. I hate it's like president of this club. What'd you do? Nothing. I'm in six honors. I hate honor societies. I'm in six honor societies. What did you do in the honor societies? Nothing. So it's about doing things that have an impact. And hopefully, I think here, guys, like my point with this is hopefully by now you can see that this isn't one weird trick to get into the Ivy League. Our purpose here is to how to help students become curious, critical thinkers, caring about other people, and taking their interests seriously, seeking to have an impact. Like at this point, it's not about what do I do to get my kid into Stanford. It's how do we have our kids be, motivated, inspired, engaged citizens, contributing for a better world. Like that's really that's my Ikigai. That's why I do what I do. Okay, so here's another framework from college admissions, just another way of thinking about activities, which is what I'm talking about. It's not about the inauthentic signing up for a bunch of activities last minute. I prefer students to have 2, max 3 really good activities and do them throughout high school than be running around left to right, doing a bunch of activities that are just kind of at a tier 4 level. I love the activities that are unique, interesting. I love when you start a beekeeping club or a bee farm or an ant farm at school. I love the weird, embrace the weird. The weird is, whatever you really want to do. Don't just do stuff that other kids are doing because you think that's what people need to do for college. And then here the last point is that I said as well is supporting your major. So the most important essay, and we can talk about this in terms of one of the things that's changed in college admissions, is college admissions 10 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. It's like you could apply undecided, liberal arts, figure it out when you're there. It's a little bit more about your potential. Today, college admissions, because of what I mentioned before about it being much more pre-professionalized, like there are more students studying computer science at Harvard than all of the humanities and social sciences combined. And so STEM, pre-med, engineering, business are overwhelmed. There's a mismatch of supply and demand, and nobody is studying liberal arts anymore. And so on the one hand, colleges need that helps us with strategy of, oh, maybe you should apply to this major and then change once you get in. Like there's some strategy there. But it's also, you need to be presenting a case when you're applying to computer science, which is extremely competitive computer science. You've got to have activities that back up that selection of major. You can't just stumble into being like, well, I'll figure it out once I get there. No, you can't change majors in terms of, oh, I'll go into business and then change it. It's not as easy as it used to be. They're much more streamlined. Now the schools do admissions committees by major rather than, and this is not always true, depends on the school, but like this is the trend that college admissions is going towards. So I'm just going to share some hot takes kind of based on these frameworks. Internships, I see parents all the time looking for their kids to get internships. I think it aligns with this kind of more pre-professional orientation. Internships are tier 4. If you go and do a job shadow, it's even worse than tier 4. It's like tier 5 because you're just in the shadows. You're not even participating. But if you use your internship as a platform, as a launch pad to then do something. So I had a kid here in Miami. He did an internship at a marketing agency last summer. Then we sat down and we wrote an article about how AI is transforming marketing and got it published in the South Florida Business Journal. Amazing. He did this internship, but we turned it into a tier 1. So use the internship as a way of developing intellectual curiosity, but have it be project-based. The pre-college programs are pay to play. You pay $15,000 to go to Harvard for 3 weeks. It does not help you get into Harvard. Why do I like the pre-college? I like them a lot for the 8th, 9th, 10th graders. It's kind of like a summer camp for high school students. So if we've been sending the kids to summer camp up in Maine or Minnesota for summers in middle school, time to not send them to, don't send them to Culver, send them to ID Tech so they can do a 2-week thing at Berkeley. Like that's a great way of getting them inspired about this process. I like that for 8th and 9th grade. That's a great use of time and money. It's not going to be strategic for the application. Now, I had a student who did 2 of these. He went to Europe, did 2 entrepreneurship summer programs, came back. He's from Ecuador, started a kind of like a academy, basically just organized a series of workshops on finance and entrepreneurship. So he used what he learned from the summer program to organize workshops for kids from low-income backgrounds. Love that. So these inherent value, not that much, as launchpads to do something of your own initiative can be great. So now what is good? I talked about this. Love students taking their interest seriously. I love when kids are doing this in 9th and 10th grade. They're not winning. They're not even doing great, but they're like, whoa, I'm starting to, it's to that critical thinking. So for example, in the Harvard economics essay contest last year, the prompt was, what do you think the impact of AI will be on economic inequality? That was really interesting. We think about AI and productivity or jobs, as we discussed earlier in the presentation, the impact of AI on economic inequality, like it even made me think, this is critical thinking. So, and this is over Christmas. So I had a student last year, just over Christmas break, sat down a couple days, put some thoughts together. He didn't win. He wasn't in the top 20. Doesn't matter. He participated. And this is great. I love for kids starting to do this earlier. It gets them thinking. So one thing also that's kind of also gotten a little crazy in the world of college admissions is that if you are applying to STEM or engineering, you are expected to be doing research and even publish your results in high school. So there's cropped up a village industry of both like research placement companies and high school research journals. You can Google them, the Journal for High School Research, the Journal for High School STEM. Like there's all of these journals. A lot of it's also pay to play, but UPenn said it. They said last year, 40% of the students we accepted did high school research. What percentage of students at Penn do STEM? 40%. In other words, 100% of the STEM students have done research. Okay, so, and that's since doing research in high school, if you're looking at STEM, computer science, engineering is now required. It's just like now, it's like doing the SAT now. It's like you just have to. And where we really focus on our students with is passion projects. And so I'm just going to finish here, talking about, there's a picture here of Rocket. So one of the students that I worked with here in Miami, Thomas, I started with him in 10th grade. And I think hopefully this just gives you a flavor of like what this process actually looks like in action. So we had our first session at the beginning of 10th grade, parents' idea. He kind of felt dragged into it, wasn't that excited, getting to know him. What are your interests? It's like, not much. Well, like, what do you like to do in your free time? Watch videos. Okay, like, what kind of videos do you like to watch? Nothing interesting. Okay, well, like, literally share your screen and show me the last video you watched. And it was about like space and aerospace engineering, stuff like this. And I was like, well, that's cool. Have you ever built a rocket before? It was like, no. So I Googled around and found him a rocket certification course up in Fort Lauderdale, got the parents' permission. And for 10 Saturdays, he went up to Fort Lauderdale, learned how to build a rocket, got certified. There's like a rocketry certification. There's like level 1, 2, 3. 11th grade, came back, started a club at his school, a rocketry club, got 15 members involved, and they were building rockets and got the physics teacher involved. They went to a couple competitions, the ARC, the American Rocketry Competition. Didn't win anything, but like he started a club and got some kids involved, and now he's competing. And then at the end of 11th grade, kind of the head of the school caught wind of this, said, hey, Thomas, like, I love what you guys are doing. We've been talking about how we need more fun electives in the science department. Why don't you and the teacher co-create a class on rocketry? So he actually spent the summer before his senior year with his teacher, and he like picked out the videos and the materials and like, put together a budget for it. Now? And launched, like founded.
And you're a good boss and you're here and look at jeans after it's done.
Yeah, thank you. He founded a class, an elective in his high school. And so, I mean, that's amazing. And it went from him watching videos to founding class. This is one of the elite private schools in Miami. So he gets to put in his college application that the first time in the history of the school that a student founded, and he was the TA for this class. So this is the kind of way, it's step by step. It's really kind of authentic in terms of helping students explore, coming out of their shell, take their interests, and then from there, it's just kind of snowball effect of what we can do from there. The final part, I'm just going to race through this, is kind of what's changing in the crazy world of college admissions, because there's a lot of headlines, and so I just want to clarify. And so first thing is the college admissions world went through a period of test optional. Most, if not all the Ivy League schools have returned to being test required. And if not, most have a policy of being referred. So this whole idea of the SAT being optional has really disappeared. They did their experiments. They did their A/B testing. They compared the GPAs of the students they accepted to the ones they didn't accept. And they've all really just gone back to requiring the SAT. So that's a first important update. The second thing is why is this happening? This graph is shocking. So I know I've been talking a lot. You've been hearing me for the last 45 minutes. Please look at this graph. 85.8% of college freshmen had straight A averages in high school. What does that mean? Across the board, 47% of US high school graduates have an A average. But not all high school graduates go to college. Some go to go to four-year university. Some go to community college. Some don't go to college. Of those going to a four-year bachelor's program, 86% are getting straight A's. So as you can see, again, everybody can hear, look at the bottom x-axis, your graduation year. So back in my day, it was the top third of students get straight A's, the next third of students get A's and B's, and then you got a final third of students who are fighting to graduate. Not anymore. 86% of students are getting A's. So because of that, we need some level of standardized assessment. And at the same time, both ACT and most standardized assessments are showing that the academic level according to these assessments is going down. So why are we having skyrocketing GPAs but declining standardized assessments? That's like a big challenge for college admissions officers to figure out, and that's why it's bad. Another important part here is affirmative action. So everybody knows this. 3 years ago, the Supreme Court banned affirmative action. So this has been a radical change, especially now with the Trump administration. For the last couple of years of the Biden administration, colleges were still kind of doing it under the radar. One of the very first things that Trump did was as an executive order. He basically put like a whistleblower policy that if someone blows the whistle on people doing race-based decisions in college admissions, that there'd be all these kinds of rewards and penalties. And so this is going to be while affirmative action changed a couple of years ago, this is going to be the first year that it's really enforced. And this is really changing the game in terms of college admissions. So this is just the immediate effect of the first year. As you can see, the percentage of students come from Black or Latino communities declined at a school like MIT. The percentage of white students stayed flat. The percentage of Asian students went up. So this is really kind of remaking the fabric. There's some people who are for, there's some people who are against, but it's just like a really important thing to understand that's happening in the world of college admissions. Another kind of important update in the world of college admissions is the role of early action, early decision. It used to be you would apply to your dream school early decision, and then you'd apply to all of your other schools. Since the pandemic, because of all of this explosion of applications, colleges are heavily relying on early decision for acceptances. So Boston University last year accepted 70% of their students through early decision. Early decision means you sign a contract. If you get in, you go. So no more of this apply to all these schools and compare offers and scholarships. It's you got to commit. So getting into these schools, especially tier 2 schools like a Tufts, a BU, is really hard through regular. Early decision 1, they invented a new thing, early decision 2, and University of Chicago was the first school to come out with early decision 3. So this is kind of technical, but the nature of applying to college, it's not just where do I apply, it's how do I apply, when do I apply. There's a huge mess with FAFSA and financial aid. This has really kind of disrupted college admissions process in terms of understanding your financial aid package. So it's been a crazy few years in the world of college admissions. As everybody can see, this is complex, competitive, crazy, and this is kind of my commercial pitch. If Jay will give me two minutes to talk about how we help families. So what we do with families is we guide them throughout high school. We help them start well. We help them really get there, kind of discover, explore, take it one step at a time. Freshman year, sophomore year, we're trying to establish that focus. Junior year, we're pushing them to get those kind of tier 2, tier 1 activities and really kind of shine. And then senior year, we're submitting applications. Remember, guys, we're submitting applications in August, September, October of senior year. So it's just 3 years. Like senior year doesn't really matter for your applications. Okay, so this is how we do it. We meet with the students every other week in 9th and 10th grade. We meet them a few times 9th grade, 10th grade every other week. We're guiding them through course selection, picking what activities to do. We're basically helping them start to visualize what is that narrative, what is that profile. We're helping them plan their summers. Now we go into 11th grade. We're doing that career exploration. We're looking at those academic competitions. We're doing the test prep. We're looking at how they can shine through leadership. We have this really nice data-driven platform to help them improve SAT. Our students for the May test improved 280 points on average. So we have a great test prep program. And then this leads us into the final part, which is the application strategy on early decision, the essays, the resume, the letters of recommendation, kind of the full guidance. So it's an end-to-end service. It's very personalized. You know, I say we're a mid-sized boutique. We're not one of these big multinational companies with thousands of people. It's a team of 50 counselors. Each counselor works with 20, 25 students. So it's a super personalized way of kind of getting the right guidance and expertise. And so hopefully this was useful to you guys as a masterclass. I know I've
This was great.
spoken.
This was great.
But
I appreciate it,
thanks,
Marcus.
Jay.
That was really good. So let's open it up for questions. Unmute and ask away.
Yeah, if it sounds, I'll just no go for it, Steven.
Oh no, I didn't. I really thought this was very informative and very helpful. I just wanted to say thank you. You covered a lot of ground, and this was really good. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Awesome. Well, there's a couple questions here, so I'm gonna start with those. So Jordan, you're asking about different weights on different extracurriculars, sports, music, drama, leadership. I mean, hopefully I got to that in terms of how to think about your extracurricular activities. We want breadth, but we really want depth. And it's so interesting how this plays out, Jordan. Like I had a student last year and I was really struggling on the main essay. It was just like, what are we going to say? And then she told me that she was like, she never told me this. I've been working for 2 years, but that she did flamenco dancing and like took flamenco classes with her mother and grandmother from Spain. And I was like, of course that's the essay. Like, of course that's the essay. And so flamenco dancing featured, prominently in the main essay in the application. And her whole thing was like, guys, I'm going to bring a flamenco club to your school. She got accepted at Yale and Princeton, all these schools, because she's like, yeah, I'm going to bring flamenco to your, who doesn't want flamenco at their college? So of course that worked. So it's funny how these little things play out in that final strategy session. James has a question here about alumni at a school. That's a great question. It's also been under fire. So the whole conversation about legacy. So basically the thing is the consideration, the debate has been that if affirmative action is going to be banned, then legacy is essentially affirmative action for wealthy students. And so that program or system has been under attack. Now, the tricky thing for colleges is that they depend on legacy for fundraising. Like, why would you donate $20 million if it doesn't help your kid get in? And so some schools have just like drawn the line and saying, absolutely not. We're going to continue giving legacy kind of a tie-breaking, privilege. A lot of schools have banned it. So I'd say at this point, a bunch of schools have gotten legacy admissions and some schools have doubled down. How has admissions shifted as job demand has shifted? Computer science and finance jobs are getting hired right out of college. Yeah, that's super interesting. I think colleges are slow. I think that's the main point, which the fact that there's still only 10 colleges there's 4,000 universities in America and only 10 offer co-op programs, despite that being the number one most important priority for college applicants. So I don't see them responding. I see them coming up with like gimmicky, and excuse my cynicism, but like gimmicky, like we have a bachelor's in AI engineering, and it's just the same degree they offered previously of computer engineering with like one elective. So I see some like gimmicky attempts, but colleges, one of their major pain points is career services. So I don't see them responding well to this change of kind of the job market. Got a question here as well from Apex Functional Health. In Florida, they allow dual admission while in high school. Is that a different process from what's happening in regular admissions and then our costs? Yeah, it's a great question. I was talking about this with Jay. So dual enrollment has pros and cons. I'll just take a second to explain this because it's also very much on the rise. So for those that don't know, dual enrollment is where you take college classes while in high school. You either like literally go to a community college, and like there's probably 1 million kids, I think, right now in high school doing dual enrollment. So it's very common. The issue just comes back to the same question of grade inflation, which is there's just as much grade inflation in college as there is in high school. So at the end of the day, getting an A in your US history class from dual enrollment is saying just as much as getting an A in your honors history class in high school. Like, because at the end of the day, like anything where it's just the teacher or the professor saying like, yep, here's your grade. Colleges are just skeptical because A's are, they're getting tossed around free candy. And so I love dual enrollment in terms of helping students to develop that critical thinking. It's very good and important for homeschool students. It just still doesn't establish the baseline college readiness, which is kind of a crazy thing to say because literally it's college. So you're supposed to show that you're ready for college by going to college, but colleges at this moment believe that the IB, the APs are better predictors of college success than dual enrollment.
So I'm not familiar with the system here, but just quick question. Are the APs tested, outside of the schoolroom? Is someone else testing the kids in AP classes?
That's a great point, and Jane. This is also so there's the AP curriculum, and then there's the AP exam. So you can get an A, and this is the point. This is what's happening. People are getting an A on their transcript for AP US history, but the final exam is scale 1 to 5, and they're getting a 2. So how are you getting 2 out of 5 on the exam, but you're getting an A in high school? And this has been what's happening. And so that's why they like these AP and IB external assessments, because it's someone different from your teacher. This is a long conversation, but parents, not you all specifically or us specifically, parents broadly speaking, have become tyrants. And so the way that a high school teacher thinks about it is like, do I really want to give them a B plus and receive another call from Mrs. Thompson, or should I just give them an A and like get on with my day? I'm overworked and underpaid anyways. And so teachers are just like, you know what, just give them the A. And so there's a lot of things happening here.
Okay. So APs are like higher ranked, SATs are higher ranked. So AP classes, high SAT, what else? Anything else? Or that's good enough?
But Jay, can I chime in here?
Yeah, yeah, please, yeah.
In Florida,
I'm just trying to understand. I'm totally confused about the system.
In Florida, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry. In Florida, you dual enroll. A lot of the kids, especially like I'm in Boca, there's FAU. You dual enroll, and you end up with a either an associate's degree. Some people even get as far as getting a bachelor's before they graduate high school.
Yeah, but it's still not enough because a teacher is giving you the grade, not a third party. So what he's saying is like because of that grade inflation, you need like a third party that tells you what the actual grade is.
So I think here the point is, are we talking about what Rice or Vanderbilt or Duke is looking for? Are we talking about what UF is looking for? Are we talking about?
We're talking about Stanford and MIT.
Yeah, so like it's a waste of time. Right. If you come out with like an associate showing, or let's say even an undergrad, and you want to apply to MIT, are they going to take that into consideration? Like, holy shit, this kid in high school just finished college in high school.
I mean, this is so again, like I went to Yale. And if you were to do a study abroad at Yale, they mostly wouldn't even take your credits from another university. And then second of all, they have a policy of they don't take the GPA. So like, let's say you did a study abroad at like London School of Economics. Yale's policy is like, we don't care about that. We're not even going to take those credits. Like it's just there's a lot of elitism here, and so
you're doing it for you.
They're gonna you would do it for you, but they're gonna kind of frown upon or look down upon associate's degrees because like that's community college. We're Stanford. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying like that's how the admissions officer looks at it.
Yeah, that's good to know.
We had a few more questions in there.
Awesome. Let me jump in here. If a student wants to be a physician, doesn't really matter where you go to undergrad. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Stephen. There's a ton of kids who go to, and even think about this cost-wise, you go to a good state school and then you go, what makes you a Harvard educated doctor is not doing your undergrad at Harvard, it's doing med school at Harvard. So that's a very valid point. There's, I think this is kind of on that art that graph I showed from Wall Street Journal. There's some benefit. Again, med school admissions is insane. Like if you're applying to 15 to 20 colleges, that like for med school, you're applying to 40 schools. It's insane to apply to med school. And so I see students looking for every possible advantage they can to just get into med school. And so is there value in going to an elite school for pre-med? There is, if it gives you a 5 or 7% jump and chances of getting into med school later. So there's kind of two sides to that argument. Ethan's got a great question. When does that demographics thing hit where there will be a lot of fewer kids applying at the same time? Is that coming in 5 years? I love this question. This is kind of like nerdy within the world of college admissions. We've been talking about the demographic cliff for 10 years, and it was like, when's it coming? When's it coming? When's it coming? This year, the number of students enrolled in 4-year universities was like 8% higher than last year. So we've been talking about this demographic cliff for years, but actually there's increase. So there is decrease in community colleges. And I think and I think this is also where like there's college is not a monolith. There is the 4-year schools, there's public schools, there's private schools, there's highly selectives, there's the regional tier schools. And so what is happening in the world of college is the world of the haves and the have-nots. The elite schools and the schools that we are talking about today, the top 100 schools, are, of course, current administration. There's some kind of complications, but in terms of demand, it's higher than ever. We're starting to see, for example, Penn State. They have a great flagship campus in University Park, but then they have like 18 regional campuses. Those are starting to get consolidated or shut down. So your regional second, third tier schools are facing that demographic cliff right now. Community colleges are too. What we're talking about now, dual enrollment, is saving the community colleges. Today, community colleges depend on high school students. So that's why there's so much marketing about dual enrollment. So yes, there's it's a multifaceted kind of approach happening. Benefits of graduating with an AA versus not a dual and taking IP. I think I offered that, Jennifer, but if there's anything else there that I didn't get to, AP classes are harder. Khan Academy AP classes. Yes, Jennifer, that's a great question. You can self-enroll. So I self-studied for a couple of AP classes. You don't have to be enrolled in an AP course if you want to sit the AP exam. Final question here, Nancy. What age grade do you recommend kids to start doing the PSAT? And then here, the CTY programs, Johns Hopkins, that's great. Similar summer courses on the West Coast. Yeah, this is great. I mean, I think there's some great things to think about middle school. So on the one hand, I think learning for standardized testing is kind of like learning a language. So when you start to look at the PSAT 9th and 10th grade, you start to learn a way of thinking. And I think that's good. So I think it's good to start to look at PSAT prep, but I think it's really important that we not fall into this, like everything is standardized tests. Like there are more, just in a purely sense of ROI, there's more ROI activities to do in 9th and 10th grade than prepare for the PSAT. So I think a little bit of like throw them into a course so they just start to get familiar with these topics from earlier is great. Like one of many reasons why the New York kids all get perfect scores on their SAT is because getting into New York middle school is crazy. Getting into New York high school is crazy. I know there's other cities like that too. So when you're just like preparing, doing these standardized tests, like the ISEE, SSAT, like it's just a language. So there is value in doing these tests from earlier. But you should not be obsessed with the PSAT in 8th or 9th grade. There's other stuff that we can do. Awesome. Well, I know we're at time. I really appreciate everybody.
You're good. You're good. Just quick question on the homeschooling front. So we have a lot of homeschoolers in our group. What do you advise them? How do you want them to approach college, prep for college? We have people that want to go to Stanford. We have kids that want to go to MIT. We have kids that are going to go to good schools. How would they approach it? I love the whole framework. All the frameworks are amazing. I think whether you go to college or not, you should follow those frameworks. But how would you go about essentially just the top framework for homeschoolers?
Yeah, I think the very simple answer is enroll in Stanford Online High School.
Stanford Online High School. Well,
They
not
have
necessarily for Stanford. I'm sorry. For any like
no, I
Ivy.
understand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I understand. They
Got it.
have the best online high school. It is designed for talented. It's designed for the kids who are a little bit, gifted, kind of too smart for school, homeschool backgrounds. It's a great mix between like live classes, asynchronous. It if you are a homeschool kid looking at the selective group of universities, that or DeWitt online, like I would put them into a more structured but still flexible and autonomous environment for high school.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, Jay, but I'm just
No, no,
kind
no,
of
no. It's good. No, I didn't know what to expect, so this is good. But so if you did take the online class, are they taking assessments after that class? So with the class, there's an assessment, there's a grade.
yes. Now, an A from Stanford Online High School is not the same from an A from your big public school. And so, like, they will look at like, those are Stanford professors. So when a Stanford professor gives you an A, it's different than when, like, your high school English teacher
Got it.
gives you an A.
Got it. Okay. I like it.
Thanks, everybody. Hopefully, this is
Thank
useful.
you.
Again,
Yeah, this was great.
no,
Yeah, thank you. I
if
appreciate it. We'll
anybody's
send the
interested in getting
recording.
information,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, just if anyone's interested in having a chat with us, Olivia dropped her number. Reach out to us. We're happy to meet you guys, but I appreciate the opportunity, Jay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Marcus.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.